Hi, I'm Aubie Knight. I'm the CEO of the Independent Insurance Agency of North Carolina, and I'm here today with two very special gentlemen. To my immediate left is Stuart Powell. Stuart's the Vice President of Technical Affairs here at the Big I. And then our other guest today is Mr. John Bode. John has been the Big I's lobbyist here in North Carolina for
38 years or so.
38 years, but really who's counting? So for quite a while. Thank you both gentlemen for being here. I want to take a few minutes and just kind of get an overview of the legislative and regulatory environment here in North Carolina as it relates to our industry, the insurance industry. I know there's been a lot of changes, particularly on the legislative side. John, how do you see those changes impacting the issues that are important to the Big I over the next couple of years?
Well, the changes really are inherent changes that you have when one party, when I started, there were only 3 Republicans in the North Carolina General Assembly. Now there's about 70 to 75% of the membership of both chambers are Republicans, and the chambers are both essentially veto-proof chambers. So whereas when we started before, they were Democratic chambers, the governor and the lieutenant governor had much more power. Today, a lot of the power is concentrated in the Senate and in the House, and not as much in the governor's mansion, and not as much otherwise in the cities and the counties. So what you have the same quality of people, different party, and the requirement to brief them on the issues simply because a lot of the folks now serving are new to the process takes more time. You have a lot more questions, but in the end, as long as you deliver the message and make sure that they understand and you talk through the issues at length, then you're going to get essentially the same result, because these are all good, hard-working North Carolina folks. They care about the people and they care about the state.
Right. Approximately what percentage of the legislative body do you think's turned over in the past 5 years? Any guess at what percentage are relatively new members?
I would say at least 50%, and maybe a little bit more. And if you look at the Republicans in the Senate, for instance, you have a group of about 15 or 20 that had been there for a decade or two. A lot of those are moving out. They're going out. So you replace them and their experience with new people, which require that you reach out to them, you talk to them about the issues, and hopefully the agents in their districts will go out and talk to them and make sure that they understand the problems in a local sense.
Okay. Stuart, when we come to the regulatory environment here in North Carolina, one thing that I've been very impressed with just in my few months here, we have a great relationship with the department. They've been very responsive when we've needed them to respond to various issues that we've had. Can you just talk briefly about what changes you've seen, I guess, in the regulatory environment and our relationship with the insurance department and the job that they're doing?
Well, our relationship with the department has been good for a number of years. I mean, well, prior to Commissioner Goodwin, we had Jim Long, who had been in there 24 years, something like that. And we had a good relationship with Commissioner Long. We had a very close working relationship with Commissioner Goodwin. We don't always agree on everything, but reasonable people can differ from time to time. The regulatory process, particularly with residential homeowners, dwelling fire, and auto workers' comp, hasn't changed much, other than the change at the top at the Department of Insurance. But and so we've got some issues that crop up from time to time that are probably a product of a regulatory environment that's been around for 40 years, I guess.
I think longer than that.
Anyway,
probably 80.
That long?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But our working relationship with the department, I think, is extremely good. The commissioner is always interested in hearing from us on issues, whether he agrees with us or not, and numerous interactions with the department on a week-to-week basis.
Great. I want to talk now about a couple of items that are going to be of particular importance to the association and to our members in the coming legislative session. One is going to be the workers' comp reform bill that we've worked on, we've gotten a lot of input on. Stuart, do you want to talk briefly about what that bill would do and why our support of, why we think this bill is a good thing?
Yeah. There are a number of issues that have been around for a long time. I've been here almost 20 years now, and hardly a week goes by that I don't interact with an agent about a couple of these issues that have just been persistent problems. And the workers' comp system has been around since the late 20s. There have been numerous changes to the system over the years, but very few in the area that seem to be persistent problems for practicing agents. And so we started working on this probably 5 or 6 years ago. The technical committee has worked on this for years. We've had these subjects on our agenda for probably 10 years or more. And we actually formulated some things that went to the board about 4 years ago, and the board approved, and we've been working on them since. Some of these came, the opportunity to deal with this came out of a very unfortunate situation a few years back, where a gentleman was hurt, and it ended up in the Court of Appeals, and it was the Gonzalez versus Worrell case. And out of that came a lot of exposés in the News and Observer on this issue of employee misclassification,
right.
is what the politicians call it. But it has to do with contractors and independent contractors and who's the employee and some of those issues. We are trying to address 3 specific issues in the legislation that we have proposed. One is, and North Carolina is one of the few states left now that has a numeric threshold for requiring workers' comp of greater than 1. There are less than 10 states now, I think, that have that, that don't apply to construction. So we're advocating moving the threshold down from 3 to 1, which would essentially mean anybody who has a common law employee would have to have workers' compensation. There's a very strenuous effort of enforcement going on at the Industrial Commission now. They have more people. They have very sophisticated computer tools over there now to try to find out who's supposed to have workers' comp and who's not supposed to have it. And by reducing this threshold, it would make enforcement much simpler.
Makes their job a lot easier over there.
The second issue has to do with the treatment of business principals. And right now we have 2 rules, depending upon whether you're an executive officer, owner, or whether you are a non-executive office owner, like a proprietorship, sole proprietorship, partnership, or LLC member manager. We have one set of rules that applies to the latter, one set of rules applies to the former. Everybody's confused about who's what, and so we want to have one rule for everybody.
And that rule essentially revolves around whether you have to opt in or opt out,
right.
Correct?
Right now, executive officers have to opt out, everybody else has to opt in. We want everybody in. All business owners would be considered as an employee, and then allow the ones who don't want to be covered to affirmatively opt out by signing some kind of document that says they're not covered. And that would clarify that they were covered and chose not to be. And that would make it much more simple and much more straightforward. And then the third issue has to do with executive officers in not-for-profit organizations like charities. Non-compensated. Yeah, non-compensated executive officers of charities or not-for-profit organizations, such as homeowners associations or charitable organizations. Right now, the way the law is structured, and I'm not the attorney, but I play one on television from time to time. If you are an executive officer, you're deemed by statute to be an employee. You may opt out, but it still counts as an employee. And so if you have 3 of them, even though they're not compensated, a strict interpretation of the law would say you have to have a workers' comp policy. And that creates a hardship for a lot of not-for-profit organizations. And so we would like, if you have a executive officer, uncompensated, non-compensated executive officer of a not-for-profit entity, they would not count in the requirement to purchase workers' compensation insurance.
Okay. So those are the 3 things. Let's go back and talk about that second item just a little bit, particularly as it relates back to our members and one of the residual benefits that we hope to gain from this, and from a clarifying the rules, let's talk about how that, we hope, is going to ease the burden up on our members from an E&O claims perspective.
Well, that's a great point. Some recent loss data that we saw from ERC Westport, or Swiss Re Westport now, was that in the line of business of workers' comp, our experience in North Carolina is twice the national average. And personally, I think that comes from some of these issues in the comp law that are imprecise or unclear and are confusing. And so by putting everybody in and then making people sign something that they know they're not covered, it should relieve some of the burden that's falling on agents. Now, we don't know how many of those E&O claims actually end up in a judgment against an agent, but there's defense costs being paid out, and so it's registering in the claims data whether or not they're eliminated from the litigation at some point or not. It's still registering in the claims data, and we would like to see that come back more toward the national average.
Great, thank you. John, let's talk about the mechanics of getting this bill dropped in the legislative body. How we're going to do that, what's going to be the strategy for getting it passed, and how might our members be available to help you from an engagement standpoint with their legislators?
Well, we've started by talking to a couple of senators who are attorneys, who understand the workers' comp law and practice substantially in that area. So what I hope to do, one of these days I'm going to get my good friend here to come down and talk to Senator Gunn, since they're both from the same area of the state, and see if we can't get Senator Gunn, who's a business proponent in the Senate, lined up with Senator Daniel, who's an attorney. Both are Republicans, and see if we can't join those two guys together and get a bill that would either go to Senator Meredith, Senator Apodaca's Insurance Committee, or a bill that would go to Senator Gunn, Senator Meredith's Commerce Committee. Now, it's also a possibility the bill could be sent to the Litigation Committee. That's a possibility, but I'm going to try and avoid that.
Okay.
So you get the bill out of the Senate, hopefully in the month of late March or early April, and over to the House. When you get it over to the House, we find the committee we want it heard in principally over there, and then take it through that committee. Then it goes to the House floor, it passes on the House floor, goes to the governor for signature. We are absolutely going to have our agents talk to members, because we talked earlier about a lot of these members being what we call newbies. These newbies don't even know what workers' comp is. Bulk of them don't have the vaguest clue. And although we've asked revenue and a couple of the other departments, it looks like to me they're not going to get involved. Even the Industrial Commission, even though they approved this bill, like this bill, they're not going to get involved. They're going to have their own bill that deals with other issues. So for us to get this bill passed, we're going to have a great participation, better than we've had on any legislation since we did the beach bill last time. And make sure that people know what it is we're trying to accomplish and what we plan to do and how it will impact and help their members and their citizens in their districts. So essentially, it is going to require that we reach out better than we have in the last 4 or 5 years. We have not had any serious problems in the last 4 or 5 years, which tends to mean that all those newbies don't know their agents. And we got to get that reworked and up. And well, I hope we get this bill done in this long session. If we get it from the House, or the Senate to the House, then we may end up passing it in the short session in 2016, which is fine.
Great, thank you. One item that has been in the press quite a bit over the past couple of months, I guess since the commissioner made his ruling on the request from the Rate Bureau on the homeowners rate. Lot of press about that issue, particularly as it relates to the widespread usage of the consent to rate form, the availability of insurance in our coastal areas. What are we expecting to see, or from a legislative standpoint, that are going to deal with some of the property reform issues that are out there?
What I have been concerned about is a large bill, and that is a bill with 4 or 5 or 6 issues. As we know, there's a bunch of counties on the coast that feel that their property rates are way too high. And we've had to deal with legislation proposed by them in each of the last 4 years. We've defeated it. But the consent to rate issue rings to some extent a chord of support with those folks. And that is, if you have signed the consent to rate form once, it's good for the rest of your life. And that is an unfair kind of thing in many people's minds. So the combination of consent to rate and high rates at the coast, and that group of people constantly pushing for rate relief on the beach plan, that creates an issue, a set of issues that are large and difficult to deal with. We're going to have to face up to that. The companies will have to face up with that, and I suspect we're going to see legislation on that sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
All right, good. Stuart, anything you want to add to the environment of property reform that is always kind of swirling around?
Well, it's a tough market and getting tougher. North Carolina has a somewhat unique system of rate setting now on a national basis. I think we're the only state left that has a rate bureau that has to do with residential property rates. And so we've been fortunate the last couple of years not to have a major event, knock on wood. But being a coastal state, southeastern coastal state, you know, there's a storm out there somewhere with our name on it. And so sooner or later we're going to have a major event, and hopefully that we're prepared for that, and the companies are interested in continuing to do business in North Carolina. But if we let the market get in too bad a shape, then we could be asking for some serious market constriction problems.
Well, certainly property reform measures will be something that we keep a close eye on. I know that the last thing we would want to happen would be for some reform bill to cause disruption in the marketplace. So we'll keep a close eye on that. I'm going to shift to some national topics now. We've got our National Legislative Conference coming up next month. We've had some success this year on the national level. Our friends in Alexandria and Washington, D.C. were successful in getting a TRIA extension, and then also the NARAB 2 bill passed. I'm sure all of our members have had the opportunity to read about that and to see those in our publications. Do you want to give just a brief recap of the TRIA extension and NARAB 2?
Well, we went for a period of time without the TRIA, and that caused a lot of consternation within the marketplace. Having some stability in TRIA now for a period of time is a good thing. It did increase the participation level for the private companies, which is not necessarily a bad thing. One of the issues I think that we deal with TRIA, we deal with it with flood, we deal with it to a large extent in coastal. When you have catastrophic events and that risk is not shared by the whole population of policyholders, you create what we like to call adverse selection in the industry, where the only people that buy it are the people most likely to have a claim, and that puts a great deal of stress on the funding mechanism and makes it very, very difficult for those programs to have adequate funding. And TRIA is one where the federal government does not require everybody to have it, so only the people that buy it. So the industry has not been able to, I don't think, generate adequate reserves to take over the private insuring of international terrorism. So the federal government is still involved at a slightly higher layer. NARAB, as everybody knows, is the licensing bill. It will set up a private organization that will that you'll be able to register with and be able to, with a great deal more ease than you can today, get licenses in multiple states and track where you're licensed and where you're not licensed, and then if you need to be licensed in another state, it's just checkbox. You will have to pay the fees and stuff, but it should be a much more simplified process for managing multi-state licensing.
And I know that's a big deal to a lot of our members as clients expand nationally and internationally and across the country. I forget the last statistic I remember reading, but the average independent agency seems like the number of states they're licensed in has gone up significantly over the past decade, and it's somewhere close to 15 or 20 states, I think, that our average members licensed in.
There are large agencies that have personnel solely dedicated to
managing that process,
managing the licensing process. And I remember the famous book back in the 60s called The Global Village by Marshall McLuhan, and that was a kind of a euphemism back then, but we've sort of got it now. And because of the state boundaries that we've operated within have become almost inconsequential in commerce today, because you can have a small business that's virtually doing business all over the country and all over the world. So it's a different world.
Absolutely. Another item on a national front, we were at the year end, we were very pleased to recognize our achievements as it related to our national PAC and SurePAC. I think for the first time in the history of that political action committee, we exceeded the $1 million mark in back-to-back years.
Yes.
Huge accomplishment, and North Carolina's always played a big part in that. The culture here has always been to support the federal PAC. I think we just finished out as the #2 state this year, just a smidgen behind our friends in Texas.
With some shady practices?
Shady practices, yeah. They kind of 11th houred us, didn't they? So, but that's okay. But let's talk about the importance of a political action committee. John, I want to bring you in on this part of the conversation. I know you don't have anything to do with our federal PAC, but let's talk about our state PAC, our NC PAC, and where that is right now, and how important is it for our members to support our political action efforts here in North Carolina.
Well, it's critical, and it's always been critical, not only that they put money in the PAC, but they reach out and deliver the checks, which it's hard for some guys to do, but that's critical because that starts the conversation that goes on and on and on. And you can look at some people that we've helped over the years, and it's not that you're buying their vote, you're not, but you get to talk to them about issues, and the conversation about the issues then helps the member understand, and it helps him look better and more knowledgeable amongst his peers, because a lot of the peers don't understand what you're talking about. That makes a good representative, and particularly a good representative of our folks. We have worked year in and year out to always make sure that we have a competent person in charge of the committees. And I think Senator Meredith is a good example. He's close to a couple of our agents down in Fayetteville. We have backed him up all the way through since the very first day he ran, because he knew those guys and they knew him, and we've helped him with a couple of tough elections. So that has worked out. It will continue to work out so long as our folks, one, make those contributions, and two, don't put them in the mail to them, carry them to them, talk to them, and make sure that they understand that they can call anytime they have any kind of insurance question.
Great point. And I strongly suspect that you feel this way. I may be just teeing it up for you here, okay? But given some of the background that you discussed earlier about the high percentage of turnover we've had and the relative lack of knowledge on insurance issues and workers' comp issues, I would presume that our political action committee, and using that as a tool to build relationships and demonstrate ourselves as experts in this area, is higher now than it has been in a while.
It's much better. We need to continue on the road upward, particularly in reaching out to these newbies. My instinct is over the next 2 to 4 years, we will lose another 20 to 40% of the incumbents we have. And that means that you got to get to know folks soon, and you got to make sure that the people in the leadership position, particularly on the insurance committees in the House and the Senate, understand what they're supposed to be doing.
All right, great. I think that more or less wraps up the topics that we had wanted to talk about. John, Stuart, thank you guys very much for your time.
It was an honor.
Yeah, I can tell. It was a lot of fun. So thanks guys for watching.